Shall we come to order? Welcome to the Midcoast Community Council meeting of October 8th, 2014. Will the council members introduce themselves?
Chris Johnson.
Dan Haggerty.
Dave Olson.
Laura Stein.
Lisa Ketchum. Are there, we have no, Sarah Rosendahl, Supervisor Horsley's aide for Princeton, is here with us tonight, but she has no report. So we'll move on. We have no other government officials to report, so we have public comment. Anybody have a public comment? Any council members have announcements?
Public comment from...
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that we have now over 230 signatures in the petition to request that GCSD purchases the post office lot, that the Harbor District sells only to the GCSD, and that the Fire District terminates any discussion of purchasing the post office lot and instead rebuilds at its current location or at an alternate location. And it's interesting that there is about I would say approximately 90% favor once the time is taken to understand all of the aspects of the situation and whether or not our community will have the opportunity to have a town plaza with park benches and some small commercial space, none of which would be blocking the views and would keep the open area, as opposed to a large building in place, which would essentially create a kind of a dead zone for pedestrian and the openness, the character of the town, right there at the most valuable lot of our one block downtown. So it's interesting that the community is really, once they take the time to hear it, is immediately on board for the most part.
Thanks, Ian. Dave?
Although it's probably too late if people are watching this tomorrow night, there is a meeting, the organizational meeting of the GCSD, Thursday evening, the 9th at 7:30 p.m. in this room.
That's Granada Community Services District, GCSD?
Yes,
Okay,
sorry.
No, GSD.
Whatever. I just was want to spell out the
yes.
X.
Oh,
Sorry.
wait. Oh, that's the
Granada,
community.
Granada Community Services.
But has that been established?
Well,
Yes.
that's going to be established at tomorrow's meeting.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I have an announcement. The Pillar Point Harbor, there's going to be a public workshop. This is related to the Harbor District Strategic Business Plan, and that'll be Tuesday, October 14th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Oceano Hotel Outdoor Banquet Tent. Any other announcements? All right, moving on to consent. Are there any requested changes to the agenda? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll place a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimously approved. All right, moving on to our regular agenda item, which is Planned Princeton Alternatives, a discussion and evaluation of proposed Princeton land use alternatives. And the desired outcome is that the council will approve comments and recommendations on these alternatives. And there's a draft letter posted on the website along with some background materials. And let me show you some pictures. While we're waiting for that, I just wanted to point out that on the MCC website, we always have, draft documents for the meeting and background materials. They're posted there with the meeting post for people to read ahead of time, or if you're watching on TV, you can look at those there. So basically, this presentation is just a slight update of one that I gave in August of 2012. This picture, just to orient you, for the Princeton shoreline itself, it's basically only 3 short blocks. The easternmost block is zoned Coastside Commercial Recreation, or CCR, and the other 2 blocks are zoned Marine Light Industrial. There's 4 streets that come down to the beach. West Point on the west end, Vassar by the Yacht Club, Columbia, which separates the industrial from the CCR district, and then Broadway, which is by Denniston Creek. I should also, and then basically the beach, as you can see, this red line is the current route along Princeton Avenue of the Coastal Trail, and then the dotted red is an alternate route which you can walk down to the beach, along the beach at medium or low tide. This eastern block is only available to walk on at like a minus tide. Its beach is pretty well gone. All right, so there's a little history here, and I'm going to talk about each block in turn. This is the westernmost block, comparing 1972, what was there, and 2009. And so this is the block around Romeo Pier, that's Romeo Packing. And so in 97, the zoning hearing officer approved, in one day, he approved 7 waterfront buildings along the shoreline of a different design than what we had seen before in Princeton, and you'll see pictures later on. And then by 2009, there were 10 of these buildings had been built. These are the red lines that show here. And interesting to note, see, in 72, when there was no erosion issue particular, people built away from the beach, along the street. But now that we have these issues, people want to build right on the edge for some reason. And the county has allowed that. So this is that group of buildings that the 7 buildings that were approved all at once. And I just wanted to point out, this group here, you can see in 2004 is about when this picture was taken. The shoreline in front of those buildings was not armored. And when they were given their permits, the deal was, you're good there, you don't need armoring, you can't have armoring, and they gave them the permits. And before the last building was even finished, they had to armor the shoreline. This is the group to the west of Romeo Pier. Each of these has a caretaker unit on the 3rd floor. And as you can see, they also have added armoring of different types. This is the group on the east side of Romeo Packing. These buildings are 30 feet tall with no side setbacks, with caretaker units, and they're on substandard lots, only 25 feet wide. Okay, I think I'm good here. All right, almost good. All right, so they're on the shoreline, and the uses on the, okay, I should explain. The Princeton, except for the CCR district, is light industrial. The area in the collected area of Princeton, not out on Airport Street, is marine-related industrial, but the county has allowed lots of different light industrial uses, and it all sort of blends together. But basically, the shoreline, the parcels that abut the shoreline, they're much stricter as compared to the inland. The zoning for the waterfront district has 2 parts, the shoreline and the inland areas. So these houses, warehouses, were built on the shoreline, and it's supposed to allow boat building, repairs, sales, launching, docking, marine supply, fresh fish sales, aquaculture processing, marine-related clubs, schools, office, and then these caretaker units. So, they say, we want to build a marine-related warehouse with a caretaker unit, and they get their permit. But these are all homes. The entire building, actually there's second homes. They're marketed as luxurious oceanfront homes. And then even there's some Airbnb rentals, 2 in one building. And this particular building doesn't even have a caretaker unit. There is no residential use permitted in that building, and yet there it is. Now, from Princeton Avenue, what you see is the whole shoreline is walled off. No sign of any marine-related business there. This is the sign over here. This is you see, you can read it. Private driveway, no visit. I mean, these are not businesses. And this is the route of the coastal trail. This is what you see if you walk along Princeton. And then this is Romeo Packing. Now they don't have, since the anchovies or whatever they were fishing for in the 40s disappeared in the 50s, they haven't been doing any fishing or dealing with marine-related issues, and they have chemical fertilizer packing facility there. And out on so this is the shoreline. They treat it like the back lot that's next to the railroad or something, you know. And they got all this stuff out there, like barrels of liquid chlorine and chemical fertilizers and this, that, and the other thing. And this riprap here was put out there, all beefed up in 2009, all without permits, and then and that takes up beach. In other words, you used to be able to walk along there at a medium tide. Now you can only walk at a low tide because the rocks are in the way. And then the latest thing is this new shed, which they put up without a permit. Okay, so that's that whole block that I just described. It's pretty well built out, and that's what happened with the implementation of the current zoning. That's what happened. All right, now the middle block here, between Vassar and Columbia, you can see there's a house here in the trees. That's still here. That's this house. And then there's this house, which now has evolved into the yacht club. It has another building with it, too. And then there's this marine-related warehouse with it's actually a house, too, but whatever. They got this whole lot here with this boat storage. They have a ramp. Yacht club has a ramp. This whole parcel here that says boatyard, can you see the cursor? How I do? Okay. That's about a third of the block, this boatyard property. And that was approved, zoning hearing officer also approved development for this. Same thing as you saw in the western block. Solid row of these buildings right on the edge. And it hasn't been built because it was appealed, and it's still languishing on appeal. That's the only thing that stopped this block from the fate of the other blocks.
The property's up for sale or has been sold.
Okay. So in the letter, we used the yacht club as an example of excellent use here and this property next door because this is actually for shoreline access. They actually put the boats into the water there. And you can, if you had a replenished beach, you could stage a whole regatta there. I mean, it would be fun. Okay. So this is
We did in
the,
fact stage the C-15 regatta there. in
Yeah.
August.
yeah, I saw pictures of that. This is the boatyard. This used to be the boat haul out years ago, and it's been empty since then. And that was the solid wall of buildings that was proposed for along there. As you can see, and they have the seawall, got no permit, it's being undermined, and it's cracked, and, I mean, all this armoring is a mess. Okay, so this is the easternmost block, and it's zoned CCR. So we have, you can see, the bluff is higher here, but you can see here in 72, there was no armoring. Well, there's a little bit here, right here, maybe. But now, extensive armoring. In fact, this bunch here, the Coastal Commission had them, they had much more rocks. You can see the rocks around on the property. They used them to make like dividers because they had all these rocks in there that they put in illegally, and the Coastal Commission had them take them out. And they were actually supposed to take them all out, but they didn't. But anyway, this is the same source of rocks that ended up down the street in front of Romeo Packing. They just trucked them down the road and put them in there. Anyway, so since 72, we've got this house here on Columbia, and we've got the B&B and Mavericks Event Center along the shoreline. This is a sign on the fence next to Columbia, 11 ocean view parcels. These are these substandard 20-foot wide parcels. And they're saying, you know, buy this. This is coastside commercial recreation. And this is what you can do in the CCR district. Single family, multifamily, commercial mixed use, hotel, restaurant, and other uses are permitted. So quite different than industrial. This is the house on the corner at Columbia. It's on a 20-foot wide lot. Looks rather bizarre. It has riprap in front. And you can see next door, without the riprap, it's eroded way in because that's what happens. Next door to riprap, you get increased erosion. This is the bed and breakfast, set back. from the beach. It has a side setback, so you can see through the property from Princeton Avenue. And then Mavericks, they have lots of on-site parking, open space for shoreline events. Then this is a recently permitted, this is on Princeton Avenue behind the bread and breakfast. So this is allowed in the CCR. You can have this commercial mixed use, and the idea is that you can have residential on the upper floor, but on the bottom floor you have some retail, foot traffic kind of a business. But here's how they propose this building, and we're given a permit for it. It has a residential on the top floor, supposedly offices on the second floor, and the bottom floor is a garage. So I mean, it's like, this could be a big house, or it could be two separate vacation rentals, it could be anything, but it's not a commercial retail kind of a thing. So this was permitted, and now it's pretty well built. Now this is the parcels between the bread and breakfast and Mavericks, and this is more this herring architecture that we saw at the other end of the street. And these two buildings were approved by the zoning hearing officer in 2009, but it was appealed to the Coastal Commission and languished there all this time. Well, they just finally heard the project, and the Coastal Commission approved it. There were some changes to address this issue of, having some kind of retail business on the ground floor and have it with a door on Princeton. So, and they changed the use for this bottom floor from what was going to be physical therapy, now it's art gallery, art studio. So we can look for these interesting shaped buildings there. Okay, so then I just threw this slide in so we can have it as a reference. We won't look at it later, but this is the alternative A, which proposed no change in the zoning districts. In other words, no expansion of the CCR, but it does reflect the rezoning of the open space lands that were formerly designated other things. That's all. And I don't think anybody's quibbling with that. In our letter, the draft says, don't expand the CCR. We do not go into how this should be divvied up between marine-related or just light industrial. I mean, that seems like kind of fine-tuning, and obviously some of these ordinances need to be tweaked anyway, but the main point was, and I think this came out of the workshop, that people didn't want that kind of a change of the CCR coming in and displacing those industrial uses. So I just wanted to point out a couple things. Wow. As I mentioned on our website, we post these documents. So these background documents for the Plan Princeton, they've been available on the Plan Princeton website and on our website all this time. But I put them here with our meeting post because particularly at the public workshop, some people expressed that there wasn't enough detail to really choose an alternative, for example, with the shoreline treatment or some other issues. And basically these documents can provide that. And actually I had hoped that when the project started, the MCC advocated to get the shoreline issue, the erosion and the riprap addressed with this project, and that was brought into the project. And so the shoreline improvement project from 2003, I thought that, this would be expanded upon, but I guess that hasn't happened yet. But the point being that in the alternatives, that there were three sort of alternatives for the shoreline, but it wasn't really clear what they consisted of. And this study does give more specifics, and it says here the Coastal Commission has initiated enforcement action against the property owners with illegal riprap along the study area. Current objectives are to remove the riprap and debris and improve the shoreline in a manner that will provide shore protection and pedestrian access along the water. And later here there are the three alternatives, and one has, so as I explained, this block along the CCR portion from Columbia to Broadway. It already has all that riprap there, proposing pretty much tidy that up, leave that there, and then would have a path on top. And then this alternative has a groin. This is supposed to keep sand from moving down shore or something like that. And then the rest, the other 2 blocks, are beach nourishment. And then the next alternative has, once again, the rock revetment is still there with a trail on it. And this has these geotubes, which are some feature buried in the sand, supposed to help hold the sand, I don't know, whatever. But, and then the last alternative has pretty much, it's got the rock revetment still there, but then it's got this bulkhead pretty much. The whole shoreline is just a seawall. And so like, this was done by engineers, but nobody ever evaluated this. It was sort of put out there in 2002 and 2003, and nobody ever picked it up. So I assume we're going to pick it up now, but it did seem premature for the council to weigh in on an alternative here because the devil's in the details. And it didn't seem like we had that yet. Anyway, let me stop talking and see if anybody has questions. Shall I close this, or what do you, anybody ready to
I think what would be nice would be like a map of just the.
go back to that
uses,
whole map? Okay.
Yeah. I'm speaking just, does anyone else? have-
No, that's why I put it there.
I've been staring at a lot of this for a long time, so whenever anybody else wants, not as long as we see.
Oh, no. Here we go. There's the map. How's that? So I assume you've all read the letter. I don't want to read the letter. Basically, specific questions about any of this or the letter itself?
I have comments, I don't, do we want to save those till later, or, I don't have a specific question, but.
Does anybody have specific questions? Okay, well, I'll just move on to comments. Does the audience want to speak first, or shall, would you rather hear what the council wants to comment on first?
Let's say the council comments.
Okay, we'll go right for the councils. Do you want to start then?
You know, I do, and I was doing a lot of researching on data on my topic, and I sort of overwhelmed myself with my data. So it might not be as organized as I'd like. But the one thing that I want to address is the land use designation proposed for the Big Wave North parcel and actually the South parcel as well. The land use designation that's being proposed, the alternatives for the Big Wave parcel, north and south. I think we should all be rather troubled by the fact that we're only being offered the 2 alternatives: retain light industrial land use or business park, and there's no consideration of agriculture. So one of the things I did check out was the California's Department of Conservancy's Division of Land Resource, and they have a farmland mapping and monitoring program that they've been doing since like 1982, and the purpose of it is to document the location and extent of important California farmlands and report how they change over time. Counties use these and cities as in their planning process to gauge how planning decisions impact agricultural land around the state. So one of the things they do is they evaluate soil, and there's huge maps with indicating specifically, and I don't have all the definitions, but there's prime soil, there's important to this area soil. They're all very clearly defined, and this parcel, the north parcel, and you correct me any place you want because you are the queen of data on Princeton. So, when I get it wrong, please point it out. Is designated as prime agricultural, and that is like the highest value agricultural land there is. So going,
I'm sorry, what was it designated as? Prime?
it's prime,
And
yes.
what was the organization?
Prime ag land.
Prime ag land.
What was that organization?
Pardon me?
What was the organization that,
You know what, I'll get all this to you.
thank you.
So take it light. You can do that.
Music to my ears.
Okay, now, in addition to that, we'll go, if you can stay with me, the LCP update, which was certified by the Coastal Commission in August 2012, and that's the same day that Big Wave was denied. requires the county to designate any parcel that contains prime agricultural lands as agriculture on the LCP land use plan map. And that's actual LCP policy 5.2. Now, this has not been done by the county. The parcel remains designated industrial. Now, my biggest concern is when it comes to making changes in land use designation, this takes years. We're not going to have an opportunity to make these kinds of changes in a very, very long time, if again. So to me, this is very important that this is considered, and obviously the Coastal Commission is also considering it as very important. I want to toss out a quote that I found interesting. This is by John Lowry, and he's the Assistant Director for the Division of Land Resource Protection. That's not so important, but he's involved with this same, to keep this simple, this same group that evaluates farmland, how it should be used, soils, etc. He quotes, "You have to be proactive about preserving farmland because land use change sneaks up on you. In the lifetime of many Californians, Los Angeles County and the Silicon Valley were among the nation's top agricultural counties. That is no longer the case. One thing to remember about good land for growing food and fiber, they're not making any more of it." I like that. So we go from there to the fact that when they collected community input, the things that were, two of the key items that were most important to people in terms of their feedback was what they wanted to see in Princeton was preserve existing small-scale eclectic character, and another was preserve environmental resources and open space. So it does not feel to me like the land uses that are being proposed support what the community is seeing as a key theme for what they want for this area. Then when it comes to the south parcel, basically the developer is saying it's going to remain undeveloped. But if that were actually going to happen, a land use designation of open space would be an appropriate alternative to consider to restore the wetlands on the south parcel. So I think people don't understand this. This is the entire country. When I started to read about this, all of the states and cities are putting together programs to save ag land, and how can they do it? And particularly because it's going to be so important to have in terms of sea level rise, which San Mateo County is continually, and to their credit, addressing. So this feels like a very big disconnect. I can tell you, would anybody guess, maybe Sarah, you know, would you say that 4% is it less than 4% of our land in San Mateo County is agricultural? Do you have just roughly?
I don't know. I think it's more than that. And I'm actually working on some maps, so I can't answer you tonight, but I can share that with you once we have it pulled together.
Okay, the reason I bring it up.
I think it's more than 4%.
Okay.
Think about just the land masses, but I can't give you a solid.
I was looking for a guess because I came across a particular bill that right now is in the California legislature, and it's AB 1961, whatever, land use, planning, sustainable farmland strategy. And what they're going to require, I'm just picking out one piece, I won't bore you with all the details, but it's going to require each county to also develop, on or before January 2018, a sustainable farmland strategy. It will require the farmland strategy to include, among other things, a map and inventory of all agriculturally zoned land within the county, a description of the goals, strategies, and related policies and ordinances to retain agriculturally zoned land where practical, mitigate the loss, et cetera, et cetera. So my point being the entire state is focusing on this, and so this feels like a very important piece of that. That's all.
Anybody else?
Dan? Well, I just wanted to make the comment that at the Plan Princeton meeting, there were certain things that we were tempted to choose without really understanding the in-depth pros and cons of either alternative. So I felt there could have been more discussion. And one of the things is the trail, and whether it's the east side or the west side. interested in hearing more pros and cons of either side. I know that the preferred side would be the east side, and I am strongly leaning towards that. And I'll just reiterate, I do have big concerns about the alternate street that around the back side of the hotel, would, in my mind, would cause significant opportunities for collisions and pedestrian strikes from just because of the busyness of the area and just two more intersections in a very dangerous area at times. That's all I have.
Got anything, Erin?
Just one quickie question, but the first thing I wanted to make was a comment that I thought that once again, I would like to underscore the fact that I don't know how, in particular, Lisa, I don't know how you find the time to do all of this.
Dave's co-author on this letter.
Well, I haven't gotten him yet. But I mean, as I read through these things, I am continually impressed. So I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of the community. I mean, it's really quite a task that you've undertaken, and I appreciate it. At any rate, I do have one quick question. So when you obtain permission for a particular use for your building, like let's say, for instance, the building that you had just shown them, they had obtained permission for an art gallery. What happens if, as the building owner, you literally can't get a tenant to come in and have an art gallery? Like, so then what happens? Does it kind of revert to who you can get, or are you obligated to leave that space vacant, or do you know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying. I think that, I don't know how it's supposed to work, but in actual fact, pretty much once you're in the building, you do whatever you want there. And the way the code compliance works is it's dependent on somebody complaining, and then action is taken. And actually, that's the genesis of whole Plan Princeton, because somebody complained about the one and only fish processing business in Princeton, that they had some violations there that the county wasn't able to address, and they didn't want to shut the business down because, and so they decided that they needed to look at all the zoning, so that's what we're doing now. Is that pretty much it?
It's pretty good, but I want to add one thing, because your question, there's a couple answers to that. One is that some things are permitted without a use permit. So in the industrial zone, for example, or marine industrial, if it's marine related, you don't have to have a use permit. But if it's industrial, you could have to have a use permit. So it really depends on it's a specific case. Now this, I don't know, because that was a coastal commission request. But in some cases, you would need to come back to the county to ask, and in others you wouldn't. So it's not a clear-cut answer to your question, but it's a good one.
Okay, thanks. That's it. I'm done.
Okay. Chris?
I echo what Erin said. Great letter. Thank you for the research, Dave and Lisa. I totally support the letter. And will wholeheartedly vote in favor of it. And just as a comment, man, what a beautiful place Princeton was in 1972. I mean, and I'm not just, just for a laugh line, but the shoreline, the buildings back from the shoreline, built along facing Princeton, the open space. I mean, I couldn't help myself but say to Dan, like, wow, I wish I had seen this place in 1972, because it's just everything you think of when you think of a little fishing village. Come to 2014, and Laura's comments about the proposed zoning for the big wave parcels, everybody's feelings about big wave aside, I think, again, piggybacking on Dan's observations at Plan Princeton of what people said they wanted and what Laura said, I ride my bike down Airport all the time, and I drive up and down Highway 1. And what has, over the last year, come to strike me as we're thinking about Plan Princeton is that, for me, those two lots, the north parcel and the south parcel, give this whole area its semi-rural, rural feeling. The fact, and people would say, but there's, Pillar Ridge is right there and Jimtown. It's the fact that there's all this open space, there's a small cluster of buildings, and then there's Princeton, and so there's civilization there, but there's this big open space, and there's farming going on in that those view corridors through those two parcels right there, and the fact that they are the majority of the land and the developed pieces are just a couple of little islands there. And I feel like what's being missed here is that, sure, there's still other open space, but when you start to fill in these gaps, and you've got now a line of buildings along Airport Street, and there's no gap there, that changes the whole feeling of the area. It's no longer semi-rural farming and like we're out in the country and there's the ocean. It's now, as somebody said at Planned Princeton, or maybe the meeting here before, it's now like, oh, I'm looking for a upholstery repair place in San Bruno or something. I mean, it's, those two lots in particular, I think, really convey to me the essence of this entire coast side. And I'm not trying to over-exaggerate, because in seeing those 1972 pictures of Princeton, it kind of coalesced in my mind that, yes, that's my fear of Big Wave, is like, it's going to close in that spot there, and if we allow this misuse of the current zoning and possibly extend CCR all the way down Princeton, those gaps that we saw in 1972 that are not there anymore, any gaps that are left are going to fill in, and it's just poof, there it goes. I mean, I grew up in San Diego, North County. That's what you're talking about, agriculture. North County used to be all poinsettia fields and flowers. It's all wall-to-wall houses now. You can't see any open space. And what people miss is that's a piecemeal thing of like, sure, 1972 is all open, and we come to now and it's all closed, but it's the frog in the boiling pot of water. It's just like, it's slowly we add a thing here, and slowly we don't do code enforcement here, and slowly we allow this, caretaker units to be built, and slowly we allow riprap to just be put on, and next thing you know, we're sitting in 2014 with no beach access, or no visibility of the shoreline, with a riprap enforced Princeton Beach, and the possibility of a business park on prime ag land in what I feel is like a key part of the essence of the coast side. These, I guess, I'm feeling emotional about it, because I'm just worried. I just feel, looking at those 72 pictures, that it's just kind of slipping away, and we really need to think hard about whether we want development for the sake of a tax base, or for the sake of progress, or whether prime ag land and what that says about the coast side and our way of life, and the possibilities of just open space. I mean, just the concept of open space is an important one, I think, to people's healthy frame of mind.
I think that the contrast here, and we do have a lot of open space up around the bluff and all, but there's this ag piece over here. It's zoned agriculture, and it's in active agriculture, and I think it's the same farmer, Jacoby, that farms them both. And thank goodness nobody's proposing this for development.
No.
But I mean, on the other hand, you'd think, well, why is this important to save, and this is not important to save? When you look at, and I'm sorry I don't have a picture of the actual farming operation at Big Wave. Basically, they get 2 or 3 crops a year out of this field. They come in and prep the soil, and after that, it's all hand work. It's organic. They run their sprinklers, and the guys are in there harvesting all the time, crates of stuff, and they take it to the farmer's market. It's like your perfect example of a sustainable local organic food supply, and they want to turn it into a business park. So that seems a shame. At least there's this piece over here, but it seemed worth at least saying this in the letter. And when they come up with the preferred alternative, we will hear why that wasn't possible. I did want to mention that, actually. So the preferred, I asked Summer, what will, the deliverables that are going to come out of this project, I mean, we know that there's going to be zoning ordinance and a new land use map. And I wanted to know, since there were these other choices at the meeting, like, do you want a community center here or a park there? And I'm thinking, we don't get that from zoning. So I'm thinking, is there another document that's going to come out of this, which will then be like a conceptual policy, sort of like the highway mobility studies that will hang around and we will refer to. And anyway, so she said the preferred plan will be the concepts that move forward from the alternative options based on public comment and regulatory considerations. It will include discussion of how and why each preferred option was selected out of the alternatives. It will be reviewed by the steering committee and circulated in the public, perhaps with some kind of follow-up informational public meeting. The preferred plan will be the guiding document for the next phase, where the focus will be on the detailed amendments to the land use and zoning. So still not quite clear how this preferred plan, how much of like a ongoing guiding document it will be, you know, in the sense of like, how much did we need to weigh in on to make sure it gets in there? But we do have these other plans that are, let me show you, that were used as background. For example, and I worked on this one, the coastal trail, basically the section going through Princeton, and this has, you know, you see quotes from this in this alternatives, but basically, that looks familiar, doesn't it? So this is from this, and we talked about, this is from this, and this was, I think it was even adopted by the Board of Supervisors. I mean, it went through the whole approval route, and it's there on the shelf. And it's only 2010, and it's like, nobody remembers this. And yet, here, you know, we talk about what's needed at these street ends, and, you know, and we haven't gotten around to doing yet, but perhaps it's imminent. And then recommendations on the shoreline erosion riprap. Here, Princeton waterfront needs a clear and accepted plan for dealing with erosion, construction at the shoreline, and illegal haphazard riprap, all of which impact public access and enjoyment of this coastal resource. Then you'll even recognize this issue here on Prospect with this curve that we're going to get designated as no parking. But anyway, then there was a suggestion in this report that we have a boardwalk because the sidewalk is crowded. Somebody said, well, you could run a boardwalk on the outside of Barbara's and connect over to the corner lot, but of course that would depend on, and as it says here, it says consider the feasibility of bypassing it, and it would require acquiring the corner lot. But I mean, these things are all in here, and we're not, in our letter, we're not saying we don't like this, we're not going back. This, we consider this still stands as ideas to consider, and so that's why the letter doesn't go into all the details. I mean, as far as like the park, there were a lot of good ideas that might happen at the corner lot, but it seemed premature to get into that much detail somehow.
Lisa, can I make just a quick notation? That's a good picture if everybody can notice. On the sidewalk there, there's red brick inlaid into the concrete. And that was done all throughout Princeton, with the exception of in front of the harbor. For some reason, the harbor didn't buy in. But that was, you know, that's very nice work. Unfortunately, it was destroyed all in front of the new Oceana Hotel. It was not, it was taken out and it was never put back like it should have been. I just want to make that point. And it'd be nice to see someday that could be uniform throughout.
Well, the only place there's a sidewalk is on Capistrano. There's no sidewalks in Princeton. Just wanted to clarify.
Well, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that area,
Okay.
from Mezzaluna all the way up.
And then here, this is April 2012, we were asking for attention to the shoreline then. And that was fortunate because it was right before this plan got underway. But this report, the study that was done, it says here, much of the shoreline has already been armored with rock and concrete rubble that has been randomly dumped. If the shoreline improvement plans are not implemented, it is expected that little to no beach will remain in the near future. Well, that has happened. So, anybody else have anything to say? Public comment? Leonard?
Could you bring up your first after photo? Early in your slideshow, you had two photos that you referred to as before and after. Regarding Laura's question about ag percent, I think you need to clarify the question. What you probably want to be asking is not what's the percentage zoned ag, because that's fairly large, but since on the coast side there's no RE zoning, what people do when they have too much money is they buy a large chunk of PAD land and make that into an estate property, and there's no ag on it. So you need two numbers. You need the percent ag and the zone and the percent used, and I guarantee the percent used is a tiny, tiny fraction of the percent zone. We have a huge amount of PAD zone land.
To some extent, the recent Williamson Act survey and dropping of properties that were not actually in ag accomplished a lot of
Well,
that.
and continue, there'll be another round of that.
Yeah.
Now
But
that
if
there's
it's still
been
zone
survey.
PAD and it's not used ag, there's still a
Actually,
Those are two
there,
conflict there.
there was a lot of PAD zone land up on the bluff that's now been changed to open space, and that was not prime ag land, so.
Okay, so,
Is that the one you
not
wanted?
that photo, the photo that I wanted was the one at high tide showing the water up to the illegal armoring right next to West Point, that one. Notice in that photo, there is no beach. And that is what happens when you armor. So I'm unconditionally opposed to any armoring of any kind anywhere. As Kit Dove said to the GSD meeting in 1999, graceful retreat. Nature always wins sooner or later. There's no point in fighting nature. Just plan for graceful retreat. And some property owners are going to lose that property, but you know that's preferable to living in a walled-off country like Holland, where I haven't researched it, but I'm sure there's no beaches where the dikes are in Holland. There can't be. And that's where we're headed with San Mateo County's plan for dealing with sea level rise. They refuse to even consider. Dave Pine laughed at me like I was a lunatic when I suggested that we stop permitting things in places that are at risk from sea level rise. He thought that was a ludicrous proposal. So I just have a laundry list of comments that I'm going to throw out. The trail, the parallel trail needs to be completely on the east side, no crisscrossing. One of the reasons that was proposed, and this is the elephant in the room that everybody knows but nobody wants to say out loud, I'm going to say it out loud. The reason that people are proposing putting it on the west side in front of the airport is because they don't want to tell the farmer to stop farming in the Caltrans right-of-way. Well, they need to tell the farmer to stop farming in the Caltrans right-of-way and keep the parallel trail in the right-of-way on the east side continuous instead of requiring two highway crossings. And so I think you might want to consider strengthening that a little bit in the letter. As far as zoning and what's allowed and what happens if the building is built and they can't get somebody for the allowed use, some of the zonings, and it's worth going, you know, I don't have this part memorized, but some zonings in San Mateo County, all uses require a use permit. And so it's appropriate for us to go look at the 2 or 3 zoning designations in Princeton, because I'm kind of sure that at least one of those, all uses require a use permit. So, you know, that addresses Erin's concern partially. Regarding the access from all the exhaust manifolds, 3 of them are in that photo there. I'm going to keep calling them exhaust manifolds because that's what they look like to me. Some people call them spaceships, whatever. After those things were built, the county finally got some and I can't think of the word I wanted to use, that in any case, some sanity prevailed at the county, and the county told people, you're no longer allowed to use the Ocean Boulevard fiction. Ocean Boulevard's a complete fiction. Those have Ocean Boulevard addresses. The county said, stop, you can't do that anymore. One of the things I want to address to people watching is I'm still looking for on-the-ground old photos from the early 20th century. If anybody has them that I can borrow just long enough to scan, I would really appreciate it if you contact me and we can make arrangements, because I want to know if Ocean Boulevard was ever drivable. I suspect it wasn't. But I'd really like to see the old photos, because the early aerial photos.
There it is, Leonard.
But
It's
no, I want.
It's a beach.
I needed to see it 40 years earlier than that, 50 years earlier than that. And the aerial photos from that era don't have the resolution to see whether it's a drivable
I
street.
think the yacht club has some photos from the 40s.
That may still not be old enough. I'll go check that
All right,
out.
we can talk about this offline.
Laura mentioned the big wave property, and they presented, do you want this or that? Well, go read the Wikipedia article on false dichotomy. That's what it is. When you want to steer the response to something you want, you present a false dichotomy and make people pick one of the two, and don't give them an opportunity to pick any other alternatives that they might actually want. And the county is really, really good at presenting false dichotomies on the coast side. And the quote about buy land, Lisa, it's a Mark Twain quote. The actual quote is, buy land, they're not making it anymore. And that's why Lenny Schultz has said that GCSD needs to buy the post office property, what's called the post office lot, but it's owned by the Harbor District. And I forget which council member made the comment about, maybe it was Chris, having everything all run together. There's actually state law. Hopefully a particular viewer watching this tomorrow will email me with the specific reference. There's a state law requiring green belts between communities. And that's really significant. We need to track down what that law is. Stuff on prime ag. The Oceana Hotel was built on prime ag land thanks to the totally corrupt Coastal Commission of 1985 under Governor Dick Majan. The residential subdivision known as Princeton by the Sea, or commonly called Clipper Ridge, that was built on prime ag land. The developer was told you can't build houses there, it's prime ag soil. So what he did, before I was here, is he pushed it all behind there, so there's a mountain of soil behind the subdivision called Prime Ag Mountain. And so he just pushed all prime ag soil aside and said, okay, now I can build there, there's no prime ag soil there. What's wrong with this picture? Last comment is land use, zoning. Laura asked, how do we get a community center there? We want a community center on that corner at Prospect and Capistrano, rezone it to COSC, or well, you can't do EG because EG is El Granada specific. COSC, there's very little allowed use other than community center in terms of permanent buildings. And so the state law, and I keep repeating this, I haven't been able to find the reference. I know one person that I'm going to ask and see if I can track down the reference. There is a state law that I knew about in 1982 when LA lost a court ruling that says when there's a disconnect between zoning and land use, you have a land use plan in a city or a county. The state law says when the zoning and the land use disagree, you are not allowed to change the land use plan to match the zoning. The judge's order was LA had to follow the rules of every other city in the state, and they had to change their zoning to implement the land use, the approved land use. And so watch out for that here. That's been an ongoing issue here too. The LCP is sort of joined at the hip with the LUP. And they have to fix the zoning to match the LUP and LCP, not the other way around. And that's part of the problem with the big wave.
All right, thanks, Leonard. Gail?
So I support the letter, you know, try and strengthen up the east side, close to the parallel trail.
Just,
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation. I thought it was great. I have a couple of comments and also a couple of questions, so I'll give you the question first. Lisa, is your presentation available?
it's posted on the website.
It says on the end, it would be something that would be available to hand out. One of the things I think it's really important, and I don't know if anyone in the county, how often people come in the planning department to visit this area. But after looking at this proposal and things like that, and actually if someone, I was in Princeton today, and I do recommend that people take a drive-by, people from the county come over, take a drive-by and see this area. And once you see this area and the way it's configured across where the ocean breaks are here, where this is here, and then you look at this proposal, you think there's no way something this large and this complex is going to fit here. If you just try driving through Princeton, try getting to Princeton. Airport, I mean, seriously, I really think people should take little tours of Princeton so people can actually see, not only that we see one on the map here, but also access to it. That's really, really important. And if these things were ever built, and I know it's a long period of time, the plan goes, but it just seems to me to be impossible. There have to be changes that couldn't be legal the way it's currently planned. I don't see how it could be possible. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I'll close the public comment. Laura?
I just wanted to say that, okay, so there's no other way to, identify these parcels regarding prime ag. So it sounds like this is a big wave discussion, which it is not. So I mean, that's the term you used. And what I was speaking about here had nothing to do with whether somebody is for big wave or somebody is against big wave. And it's a hot topic in the community, but I think, there needs to be a distinction between what our issues are in our letter as far as we're not addressing big wave, we're addressing land use.
Right, and specifically the paragraph relates to Airport Street, and it says, "Do not create a business park district on Airport Street, which could thwart the community's desire to preserve small-scale eclectic character." And then it says, "Comply with the LCP policy 5.2 and designate as agriculture the prime agricultural actively being farmed on Airport Street, da-da-da." And so the statement is made, and then when the consultants come back with the preferred plan, they may have that there, or they will explain why it's not there. So we've
Covered it.
yes, we've covered it.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So do I have a motion?
I'll put a motion that we already have the wording in our agenda. That the council approve comments and recommendations on Plan Princeton alternatives.
Second that?
All in favor?
Aye.
Approved unanimously? Thank you.
Thank you.
So, moving on to council activity. Anybody have anything to report? I'll start. On September 30th, I attended in Laura's Place the TAC meeting for the Comprehensive Transportation Management Plan, nicknamed Connect Coast Side, to hear about the first document, which is the draft build-out analysis and traffic projections. And the consultants will be here at the MCC to present this material at our next meeting on October 22nd. It's very interesting. And then on Saturday, October 4th, I attended the West Trail public meeting held by the Harbor District General Manager. And it has phase 1 scaled back. Okay, the West Trail is the trail that goes out to Mavericks and the beach, and it has an eroded section there, about 300 feet. There's also a culvert, which is the worst part of the eroded area. So at this meeting, they said phase 1 has now been scaled back to just replacing the culvert and putting a head wall there. And the protection of the remaining 300 feet of eroded shoreline along the trail was moved to phase 2. The trail repair became urgent in 2011 when the section at the culvert was partially taped off. it's been a fixture for long. So 2.5 years later, in July 2014, the Harbor District submitted an urgency permit application to the Coastal Commission. To date, the application is not complete. Nevertheless, the Harbor Commission was asked to approve putting out the project to bid, and they did that at their last meeting. But like I said, this eroded situation was urgently obvious in 2011. And during all of 2012 and 2013, no action was taken. They did a report, engineers did a report on proposed armoring of that section, and it was not released to the public or the Harbor Commission during the entire time that the Harbor Commission was getting, the Harbor District was getting their urgency permit to dredge the launch ramp and put the dredge material on Perch Beach. Once that was finally obtained, then they brought forward their report on the West Trail. But then again, like another whole year went by and everything, and so they didn't submit their application for this urgency repair until July this past summer. And like I say, the application is not yet complete. The Coastal Commission staff replied. They had a number of items they needed, and one was why a soft solution, so sand nourishment, was not considered. And the consultants have just replied the other day to that question. The answer is, quote, placement of dredged materials was not a feasible alternative for this proposed project because the culvert repair is urgent to provide continued and safe coastal access. The Harbor District would not be able to wait until a future date when harbor maintenance dredging is proposed and permits secured. Unquote. I just had to tell you. Okay, that's it. Chris?
Just, if I could just make a comment on that. The yellow tape and the poles that were holding the tape are not even there anymore. So at least the tape was something, because if they're making some cost-benefit analysis about this, where is the almighty shrine of liability and risk management? Because it is now a safety issue. It was like, oh my gosh, the trail's a little eroded. That's, it's a bit of a bummer. It is now a safety issue where it has come far enough in that it's kind of like right at a bend in the trail where people are not prepared from that, and they come around from Mavericks, and they come around this little bend, and there's people walking 3 or 4 wide with their dogs and bikes and other things, and the drop off is right there. I mean, so we're just going to wait until somebody trips and falls and has a compound fracture their femur in that spot, and then then the Harbor District gets sued. Geez, well, I guess then they'll have them make a decision about whether it was better to kick the can down the road or put their sand on Perch Beach and let this continue on and on and on. So I feel like it's now a legitimate safety issue there, and it's not even flagged anymore. So it's just, I can't believe that situation has gotten significantly worse, but it has.
Our tax dollars at work.
Anybody have anything else to report?
To add to that, it is well documented with, people's walking on the trail, photos of it, and also on paper, far-reaching documented that they knew it is a hazard, and now they're just ignoring it.
Well, it's not so much as a hazard that the trail is in danger of having to be closed entirely, and it is needed for emergency vehicle access, plus as a recreational trail. And yet it's like they just wait, and then they come in and say, well, we need a special deal here to get this permit. We got to do this now because it's an urgency thing, but it's been 3 years. Anyway.
How wide is the narrowest drivable part at this point?
It's getting very close to less than 8 feet.
Yeah.
And yes, they are clearly waiting until there's an absolute emergency to act, so they can get the emergency.
They didn't want to bring it forward before because they didn't want to be told they needed to put their launch ramp dredging over there because they wanted to put it on Perch Beach.
Yeah. Well, they could still truck it.
It wouldn't have been much farther. Anybody have any other meetings? Okay.
On September 17th, Dave and I attended the San Mateo County Housing Element Update. And they are updating the housing element is basically kind of like the blueprint, the guidelines for what's needed and what's gonna happen for housing in an 8-year cycle, and they're updating it for the next 8-year cycle right now. The important thing I wanted to mention is if you're interested in commenting on this, they've got an online forum to comment. And if you go to the county website and look for the housing element update, you can make comments about this update that they're doing they intend to have a draft document of the update, of the housing element update to the Board of Supervisors this fall, and hope to have it improved and put in place by early winter of 2015. So I believe the comment period is still open, and if you're interested in doing that, please comment on that. The other thing is on October 2nd, I attended a ad hoc subcommittee meeting for the San Mateo County Parks and Rec Commission. This ad hoc committee is formed by Neil Merrilees to look at developing a policy for San Mateo County parks in the unincorporated area. And there was 7 committee members there, and the encouraging thing for me is 3 of those committee members are from the coast side. This was the first meeting, so we were just kind of feeling around, and one thing I kind of noticed and pointed out was they were kind of showing some maps with some census information and populations and stuff, and what kind of jumped out at me is, based on comments from the other representatives from over the hill, is over the hill they've got a lot of infrastructure, and they've got a lot of communities together, and they've got cities that have their own infrastructure that people can use. They're looking for open space. On this side of the hill, we've got plenty of open space. We're looking for infrastructure. We're looking for bathrooms and structures, and we've got trails and open space. Not that you can always use more of that, but it's kind of interesting how the rural part wants some development of infrastructure, and the developed part wants some open space. So we're going to have more meetings on that, I think at least once a month, and the end goal is to develop some kind of draft comment to present to the Parks Commission and the Board of Supervisors, suggesting some kind of policy for county involvement in parks in the unincorporated area of the county.
Can you name the 3 coast side members?
Well, Neil, myself, and Nick, can't remember his last name. He's a member of this committee for Pescadero. I think it's called,
We have somebody from PMAC.
PMAC, yes, PMAC, yep.
Because it's something that's really important. I don't know if anybody read the article recently about the Moss Beach Park snafu, which is really embarrassing, but it's a good example of the type of thing that happens here, because there is very little of any kind.
What happened to, we did, actually, we talked about that because, that it was never zoned for park, and so that, one of the things that came out of this meeting, thank you, Gail, for prompting me to remember this. One of the things that came out of this is we were presented with a lot of census data about population and income levels. That's good to see, but what we realized we need an inventory of what we have. Everybody universally said we need more bathrooms, more public bathrooms. Well, do we have a list of where there are public bathrooms? Crickets. So, the first thing that we asked for was, can we get an inventory of what resources we have, what properties we have? And then we asked for another kind of overlay on top of that, or what are all the organizations and entities that have any kind of parks authority or power or management, so we can see, what are all the entities that could have a restroom or could have a playground or something like that. And let's try to get all that information together so we can first sort out, what do we need and where do we need it? Because right now, we're just, we had a lot of anecdotal, Pescadero needs a public bathroom, North Fair Oaks needs this. Great, okay, that's great for the 7 people that are here representing their little spot, but what do we need, what do we have, and what do we need? So that's hopefully, in my feeling, the next piece that I want to try to get out of this committee is, let's get a pretty solid inventory so we can make more strategic decisions on what is needed and where. And then once we decide, we have idea about that, then we can start to develop a policy to address those needs. Because we don't even really know exactly what the needs are, except for more bathrooms, which is apparently universal.
Thanks for doing that.
It was fun.
I have something to add about the housing element. Actually, I was the one that was there with you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I,
I'm sorry, I talked to Dave about it beforehand.
I was
Yeah.
gonna,
I'm sorry, Lisa, that.
it was, no, it's
Sorry.
fine. It was interesting to me because I had a chance to ask a question and and because this is happening at the same time as we're just about to look at the transportation management plan and the build-out analysis, and I said, so first of all, I said, for the housing element, are you getting any of your data from, or is there any exchange of data between the two? If anything, they might use, the housing element might use data from the transportation management plan. It doesn't work the other way. The housing element, they get their, basically, it comes from above, from the state to ABAG to the county. You have to have so many residential developable lots that you can have. You have to have the inventory there. You have to show you have the inventory. Here's your allotment. If you don't have this many, then the county would have to rezone to make that. And so this was an insight to me because I had observed in the history of the Midcoast contentious development attempts for the affordable housing sites that we have, Moss Beach Highlands and the other one, and recently with the airport compatibility update, the concern was that these new safety zones now come across the middle of the Moss Beach Highlands property, and the county was saying, oh, well, we're going to lose this. We need this density housing. And, you know, you could interpret that to mean, oh, the county wants to build there. But now I see that's not really the issue. They want to show they have this empty space that could be built on.
yes,
And that's really different.
yes.
It-
This has been very controversial in Palo Alto, and Palo Alto just went through it. And it
Yeah,
made
so-
very clear, we have the space for it, we have no intention whatsoever of authorizing it.
But that's all the housing element needs to do, is show that there's a space to fill the allotment. And so basically, and then knowing that this transportation management plan is being done and this whole topic of build-out analysis and our substandard parcels and all this stuff, that's going to be the one to focus on. But that's going to be very interesting and as to and you'll see that at our next meeting. But another thing about this housing element, so I'm looking back at the current housing element is actually from 2012, it's not that old. And so there's these long tables in the back of all the actual parcels, residential parcels that are available to be built on. And this is the inventory. And I don't know how I didn't read the whole thing very carefully, but there were these parcels in Princeton which were proposed, large parcels in Princeton, which were proposed for ultimate build-out of, there was one parcel for 50 units of multi, you know, and another for, I don't know, 20 or something. And the one parcel was fairly large, the other was quite large. So look at the map, I get the map out, see what parcels are these? One was the corner lot at Capistrano and Prospect, and the other was the Harbor District parking lots. You know, like that's and the description in the table says that this is undeveloped land, that there are no environmental constraints to building housing there. The only problem might be availability of water and sewer. And I'm thinking, but this is a very expensive asphalt parking lot that the Harbor District has got a big debt on. I was like, this is not going to be, and yet this is in the inventory. Well, those were just the two that jumped out at me. But like I say, I don't really think the fact that basically this is just a document the county has to produce to show the state that did their thing. It's not like, you know, we need to say, oh, we're going to fix this. I don't think that's the issue here. I just thought that was weird.
So along those lines, all the Plan Princeton documents show medium-density housing at the north end of the airport on a section of Marine between Highway 1 and the runway, which I thought was a very interesting place.
Say that again?
There's medium-density development, residential development shown on Marine on the
Which-
west side of Highway 1, which is right next to the north end of the runway. It's where
But
the
it's
farm is there.
outside of the, it's outside the Princeton, the
No,
boundary.
it's inside, it's right
the boundary?
inside the boundary. There's a little chunk of medium density right there at the north end of the runway, which I'm sure came from exactly that kind of scenario.
I didn't notice that. I'll look
I'm
at that
sure
because
almost nobody noticed it because I didn't hear anybody talk
Well,
about it.
I've been at lots of discussions, no one's ever mentioned it, so I'll check that out. That, my sense is that probably wasn't, it's probably existing and hasn't been looked at.
It's not existing
Because
medium
the-
density housing, I can tell you that.
I'll check it out.
There are some houses there, but it's not medium density.
The zoning isn't.
The zoning, I don't know.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
So the zoning.
My
okay.
guess is that it's existing
Right,
zoning.
Right, but
that
nonetheless,
there may
it
be
is
a
literally
corner-
right next to the runway.
A
It's not where
corner
you would put
within,
housing.
the Plan Princeton, but we have limits as to what we're looking at. But, yeah, okay, so I'll look at
It was inside the dotted line, it was colored.
Okay, anything?
One, I just wanted to make mention of the correspondence I received recently in regards to the San Mateo County Planning Commission's vote to deny the request from La Costanera. And I just kind of wanted to throw out some attaboys to the county. I believe that they acted in a fair and just manner and in the best interest of the community. And sometimes it seems like we are maybe somewhat at odds with the county, but in this particular instance, I believe that they acted in, as I said, in the best interest of the community. I just wanted to acknowledge that.
And best interest of the whole county.
I would agree.
And it was unanimous.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, future agendas, as I said, next meeting we have, we not only have the Comprehensive Transportation Management Plan consultants coming to talk to us, but also the Highway 1 protection at Surfers Beach project. We're going to hear on that. So that's it. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
I'll move we adjourn.
I'll second.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.